Okay. Hello and good evening, everyone. I am Nishadh from Covidav, and I welcome you all to You Matter by Covidav. Those of you who have joined in and are not sure about what Covidav is, so we are an online mental health platform that allows you to book a free audio or video based online mental health consultation. We have partnered with very eminent and skilled and leading psychiatrists and psychologists and other mental health experts from Psychiatric Society of Goa, Sangat, the government of Goa, Cooj, and Antarman. So to book a consultation, you have to go to www.covidav.com, and that's where you can submit your appointment request. You Matter is our knowledge initiative wherein the objective is to spread awareness about mental health and also to have mental health experts uh, giving some insights, some best practices that can be followed in these times, especially to take care of your mental health. In today's session, we have Dr. Abhijit Nadkarni, who is the director of the Addiction Research Group at Sangat. He's also an associate professor at LSHTM, United Kingdom. So he's here and he's going to help us understand about what self-care is as far as mental health is concerned. Uh, how the session would go is we will basically, it'll be a discussion for around 20 minutes or so, post which you can share your questions, any doubts that you might have with regards to mental health. It could be, just about anything with regards to emotional wellness, mental health, and I'm sure Dr. Abhijit Nadkarni will be more than happy to have your questions answered. Right? So once again, Dr. Nadkarni, welcome to You Matter. It's a great pleasure to have you, and I think we'll start with our first question. So let's begin with why do we need to focus on self care?
Sure. Thanks, Nishad. Thank you for having me here. It's always a pleasure to interact with people from the community, trying to kind of put out the message about mental health and the importance of mental health. And As always, I think it's one little drop at a time because, as I was saying to you earlier, it's difficult to win against Virat Kohli. And a lot of people probably are watching the IPL match rather than preferring to come here, which is not necessarily a bad thing because it kind of tells us that people are taking care of themselves by taking a break and watching cricket on an IPL. So I'm not complaining. I'm better to do that than kind of probably sit through sometimes a very dense webinar. But yeah, to answer your question, I think why do we need to kind of take self care? I think to a certain extent, this question has become to a certain, at least a certain social demographic, superfluous across the world now because. One good thing that the COVID epidemic or pandemic has done is to actually get people to focus on their mental well-being. People who are not talking about wellness, that is mental wellness, people who are not talking about mental well-being are not actually having conversations about their mental health. So, of all the negative things that have come out of this pandemic, which is people becoming seriously unwell, people dying, people losing their jobs, the economic downturn, and all of that across the world. I think probably the one good thing that has come out of this, and which I hope will be sustained beyond the life of the pandemic, is that people are actually thinking and talking about their mental wellness. And
Yeah,
and and
that's
the
good.
sorry.
Go on,
Yeah.
please.
So I think so that kind of gives us one reason why we need to be talking about mental uh, care, self care, etc. That is what's happening around us because
Right.
things that happen around us affect us. One of the most important thing to remember is although we try greatly to look for internal pathology to explain mental health problems that we might experience, a large chunk of mental health problems or psychological problems or emotional problems that people experience start from their environment, and a small proportion of it, or the part of the illness that comes from internal pathologies is relatively limited, which then means that we can do things to ensure that these environmental factors do not affect us. And then, what are these kind of things that affect us and lead to mental illness, or not having good mental wellness? Are simple things like what we commonly call as stress. Now, what could this stress be due to? I mean, the stress could be due to a lot of things. It could be due to problems at work. It could be due to problems within the family. It could be problems due to money. A lot of different things can cause stress and affect our mental wellness. The other common things that can affect our mental wellness are, and I'm going to talk about what's happening in the contemporary world, is loneliness. Although we might be living around or with a lot of people around us, a lot of these people are in a virtual reality. And that is increasingly becoming so in COVID times. We might be having these virtual meetings. We are kind of interacting with people over phones. We are interacting with people over social media. But in the middle of all of that crowd that's virtual, many people are experiencing loneliness, and that affects our wellness. What are the other things that affect our wellness? Simple things like not taking care of our sleep, or responding to not feeling emotionally well by using external crutches like alcohol or tobacco. That's not very good for our wellness. Um, Being not mindful of what's happening around us, and I'm kind of being focused in the internal world, spending a lot of time indoors because we are kind of interacting a lot virtually, not going out there and interacting with people, some of which might be limited due to the current circumstances, but there are still ways of interacting with people despite maintaining physical distancing, um, are some of the things that affect us greatly in terms of our mental well-being. And I think the most important thing that I just want to say here is what I said right at the outset. We tend to focus on internal pathology to find why we are not experiencing well-being. What we need to focus on is the things that are happening around us, which are the controllables that are causing us distress or stress, or leading to worsening of our mental wellness. And those are the things that we need to be focusing on.
Right, right. In your response, you mentioned two key things. Uh, One is, I mean, we keep hearing this very often. So, what exactly do you mean by being mindful? And what relevance does it have in our lives?
Sure. So, kind of to use kind of the simplest terms to kind of explain mindfulness, because it's in a sense it's in a way it's pretty complex, but at the same time it's also very simple. I would kind of, if you were to ask me to tell me what mindfulness is in a few words, I would say being in the moment, right? What we tend to do generally is not focus on what's happening around us. We are thinking about what's going to happen next, what's happening in the other place, what I should be doing, what I should have done, what has happened to me. And in doing that, we are not focusing on what's happening around us at that very moment, and which then leads to stress, because you are not focusing on things that would help you to relax, but you are focusing on things that have caused you stress in the past and engaging with it constantly, which then leads to increased stress. A very common example which kind of shows us how we are not mindful or not in the moment is, again, if you go to any tourist site, for example, what do you see there? Lots of tourists. What are the tourists doing? They are clicking selfies.
Selfies.
You might be in the most beautiful place in the world. You might be in a place where you will never ever come again because let's say you've gone abroad, you spent a lot of money, you're probably not going to go there again. But what do you see people doing? They are clicking selfies. They are not absorbing what's there in front of them. They are not kind of soaking it in, getting kind of getting pleasure out of it. What they are focusing on is what's the best angle, how do I get the best picture, what filter do I apply, and how do I post it on Instagram so people know that I have been here. But that's
Right.
not helpful for your own well-being. I mean, that might be good for maybe your social standing, but that's artificial and short-lived. For your mental well-being, you have to be enjoying and focusing on what is there in front of you, and that's very simply mindfulness.
I think that really helps, because we see the term being floated so often, and I think we've got a lot of insights around what mindfulness really is. Coming back to self-care, we see self-care is it's a word which is very common in healthcare in general. So, as far as mental health is concerned, how does one practice self-care?
Sure. So again, I think it's great that you mentioned that it's very common in healthcare and physical healthcare, and I'm saying it's great you mentioned that because it helps me kind of to draw up an analogy. We are extremely good when it comes to self care related to our physical health. So we are good at not everyone, but a lot of people who are health conscious. You're very good at managing our diets. We are good at exercise. So we are good at anything that takes good care of our physical health. But when it comes to care of our mental health, we are not so good. And there's a reason for that. I mean, many times it's because we don't really know what we can do to kind of self care of our mental health. So very simply, self care for mental health, again to use an analogy, is the apple for the mental health, right? The apple that keeps the doctor away, the kind of the proverbial apple for physical health. In mental health, I mean, you can't really eat an apple to be healthy mentally. So it's the self care bit of it. So what are the kind of things that we can do? And again, these are very simple things that we can do. And actually, they are exactly the opposite of what I said earlier. Are the things that lead to mental unwellness. You do need to do things that will kind of take you closer to mental wellness. So, for example, what do you do to do that? So first thing is spending time with yourself and for yourself, right? So again, the rush of the modern world, which is to a certain extent slowed down with the pandemic, but that brings with it its own set of stresses. But giving yourself time to do things that you enjoy, this is extremely important, especially in pandemic times. I'm kind of foregrounding everything to the pandemic at the moment because it's an excellent example of how things around us can affect our mental health. So we are spending a lot more time now. Those of us who are working from home, spending a lot more time in front of our devices and into meetings, etc. It's taking a lot more of our time than it used to take before. So we're not having time for ourselves. So kind of setting time aside for ourselves to do things that we enjoy and which gives us pleasure. And this could be anything. I mean, it's not saying that everyone has to take up painting, right? I mean, everyone can't do it, and so you have to kind of pick and choose things that give you pleasure. It could be gardening, it could be going for a walk on the beach, it could be painting, it could be reading, it could be listening to music. It's what suits you, it's what gives you pleasure. You have to set time aside every day to do what gives you pleasure. And if you're saying that you don't have time, my usual response is there's no such thing as no time. You have to make time for things that are going to keep you healthy. You're never going to say that if you had high blood pressure and the doctor said you need to go for a half an hour walk every day. I mean, you will make time to do that, right? So similarly with mental health care, you have to make time for these pleasurable activities. That's one thing. Spending time in the moment, which is mindfulness, very important. Again, I'm not going to get into the details of that because I've already spoken about that and what it means. um, there is evidence to kind of growing evidence now to show things like meditation helps. Now, it might not be for all of us because it requires a certain amount of self control and practice to do that. But if you're able to do that, again, it's a type of a mindfulness at a slightly higher level because you have to kind of do a lot more than just being in the moment. So meditation does help. Taking care of your sleep, very very important. I mean, one of the things that happens in modern times because of technology and devices is our sleep gets impaired. Again, taking good care of our sleep is very very important. Getting some amount of physical exercise, very very important because it then leads to development of certain chemicals in our body called endorphins, which are good for our mental health. So simple things like exercise, diet do help our mental well-being. But the most important thing is making time for these things. And what does happen is we don't make time for these things, and hence our mental well-being suffers. So these are some of the things to keep in mind. Very briefly, diet, exercise, mindfulness, meditation if it works for you, and doing things that give you pleasure. This might sound like very simple things, but they do help with your mental health. And finally, if none of these things work, or if these are not things that kind of you find helpful, then very important is to find someone you can talk to. Find someone you trust. Find someone from a friends group, family, anyone, someone who trusts, who is willing to listen. Because many times just talking about your worries, talking about your stress, gets helps you get rid of it. So having someone trustworthy in your life, it doesn't have to be 20 people, and it's certainly not the thousands of people that you have on Instagram or Facebook. Or just
Right.
has to be one person whom you can kind of communicate with and express your feelings, your worries, etc. That makes a big, big difference.
Sure. I think one thing that you mentioned about about sleep. I personally monitor my sleep very closely, so much that I've invested in technology that helps me monitor my sleep. But what happens is generally due to work or due to thanks to a lot of streaming options that are available, we end up hitting the sack quite late, say 1 a.m., 2 a.m. And and let's say, given the condition that we sleep for, say, the 7 hours or 8 hours, whatever, uh, how does that, affect our life? So let's say we get those 7, 8 hours, but we don't sleep at the right time. Say we sleep at 1 or 2. I mean, is that okay, or how would you define good sleep?
Sure, that's a good question. Um, it's how do you define good sleep? Now, if you kind of very simply say how do I understand whether I've got good sleep or not, the most important thing to remember is it's not the quantity of the sleep that's important. It's important, but that's not the only criterion by which you decide whether you've got good sleep or not. It's the quality of the sleep that's very very important. So and then I say that's very important because there are variations in the amount of sleep that people require from person to person, and also across the lifespan. Like you might as you if you look at kids, they are kind of sleeping almost all the day, and then your need for sleep reduces, and then as you get into older age, that kind of then reverses again. So it's you can't apply a kind of a rule of thumb to everyone. That's one thing. So it varies between people and across the lifespan. But it's important to have clarity about the quality of sleep. Now, how do you determine whether you've got good quality of sleep? Simple thing. If you wake up in the morning and if you feel tired and if you think that you would require more sleep, then you have not had good quality sleep. You might have slept for 8 hours. But if it's a disturbed sleep, you wake up in the morning feeling tired and think, oh, I need some more rest. Now that means that your quality of sleep has not been good. And the thing about sleep is that if your sleep is consistently disturbed, then your sleep cycle becomes like that. And in the sense, it sustains itself in that manner. It has a knock-on effect on your daytime, and getting it back on the rails becomes very difficult. So, for example, if you're spending a lot of time on, say, let's say Netflix or Instagram, whatever, at night in bed, and which means that you sleep at 2 a.m., then you wake up at 11 or noon, and then you kind of work through the day, and then it has a knock-on effect. Then you don't feel sleepy until 2 a.m. the next day, and that becomes your normalized cycle, and that's kind of disrupts it, and that has a knock-on effect. You're not sleeping well, that has a knock-on effect on your mental health. There is fatigue, tiredness, your mood is affected, you become irritable, there's anxiety, and a lot of other knock-on mental health effects happen because your sleep is disturbed. And one of the biggest culprits in the modern world for disturbed sleep is technology. That's what is keeping people awake more than ever before.
Right. Uh, my next question is around something which is very common in our lives, especially given the current flux of working from home, where the line between work and the rest is totally diminished. It's about stress. So, A, is it okay? Is it normal to be stressed? B, when should I know that it's gone out of my hands? So,
Sure.
how?
So the first thing to again remember is that it's inevitable. Stress is inevitable, right? I mean, all of us are going to get some kind of or the other of stress at some point in our life. There's no running away from it. So, kind of thinking that I'm going to have a stress-free life is there's no point in thinking that way. Um, what we can do is understand stress better and learn how to deal with it better, right? There are certain kind of stresses which can be avoided completely. I mean, like for example, let's say if we are in relationship that's causing us a stress, it's possible, it's within the realms of control to end that relationship, so that because it's toxic or not very helpful, and that kind of takes away the stress. Or for example, if kind of a relationship or interaction with a friend is causing a lot of stress, we can avoid that particular friend. So it's possible to a certain extent to avoid stress, but you can't the triggers leading to the stress. I mean, but you can't always run away from the triggers. So, and again, coming back to my perennial example, COVID-19. I mean, it's not something that you can run away from. It's there. It's a reality. We have to learn how to deal with it in a more effective and efficient manner. So one thing to remember is stress is inevitable. Two is some types of stress is useful. So we have use stress and we have distress, right? Use stress, I mean, if we kind of look at again at our work, let's say if we have to make a presentation or kind of that we've got a deadline for a project. If there is some amount of stress, it increases our efficiency so that we are able to deliver on time. When do we call it distress? We call it distress when it starts affecting our efficiency. Right? So if that stress is not actually making us more efficient, it's making us less efficient. It's kind of causing us sleepless nights. It's we kind of becoming very anxious, etc. That's distress. We don't want to go there. We want a little bit of stress because it helps us function better. We don't want a lot of stress. It's distress because that causes problems. Now, so how do you deal with it? One is try to avoid the triggers for the stress. Not always possible. Look at the controllability of the trigger that is causing the stress, right? So, what do you mean by controllability? It's many times we get too involved in thinking about dealing with the triggers which are not within our control at all. Thinking about that just increases the stress. We need to focus on what is is controllable, what we can control. So again, coming back to COVID-19, we can't do anything about the virus. I mean, the virus is out there; it's not within our control. What's within our control? Wearing masks, washing our hands regularly, maintaining physical distancing. That's within our control. Now, if we start worrying about will I get the virus? If I get the virus, what is it going to do to me? Will I survive? Will I die? Unnecessary stress, not within our control. We start worrying about, okay, every time I need go out, I have to wear a mask. Every time I go out, I have to maintain physical distancing. Every time I come back, I have to wash my hands. And every time I touch any exposed surface, I have to use a sanitizer within my control. The moment we can think of things that we can control, that by itself reduces our stress automatically. Other thing is the locus of control, as we call it. Where do we now fix the cause of the stress? if we, and this is exactly the opposite of controllability. If I think that I am getting stressed because of something that someone else is doing, then I can't do anything about it, right? Like if I start, I say, oh, okay, Nishad has invited me for this talk. I'm stressed because of what do I do? I'm really stressed. It's all Nishad's fault. Now, if I say that, I can't do anything about it. I continue being stressed. But if I kind of put the locus of control inside me, it's like, okay, this is me. I can do something about it. This anxiety or stress is me. I'm getting stressed because I am not really sure what I'm going to talk. Maybe I kind of write down a few talking points, make it easier for me to then communicate the message that I have to put out there. That then entirely shifts the locus of control from outside, that's you, to inside me. And that then helps us work on it better and reduce stress. So these are some of the things that we can do, and the other things that I've kind of spoken about earlier as well are pretty important in terms of managing stress.
Sure. Moving on to the last question before we go on to the audience. Once again, it's a reminder for those of you who have questions, please post it in the respective chat, whether you're watching it this on AirMeet or Facebook or YouTube. You can just paste your questions. I see quite a few questions coming in, and we will have them answered at the end of the session. So finally, I have, let's say, taken care and paid heed to self care and all the pointers that are important to sort of take care of myself. If all doesn't work, uh, how do rather when do I know that I need to seek professional help? And when I say professional help, what are we referring to? Like I'm
Sure.
sure quite a few of us are not even sure whether we need to visit a psychiatrist, whether we need to visit a psychologist. So what's the protocol there?
Sure. So again, we are very good at determining that when it comes to physical health, right? I mean, we know that. I mean, if we are feeling a little bit dizzy and we think that there is my blood pressure might be going up, we kind of indulge in some kind of self care. We kind of reduce salt in our diet. We kind of do a little bit of exercise. We manage our diet better. And then if you start getting kind of uncontrollable headaches, you're finding yourself dizzy, you go and meet your general practitioner. So we're very good at that. I mean, even though we are not doctors, the general public is not doctors, we're still kind of pretty good at doing the right thing. When it comes to mental health, I think it's basically a lack of awareness about what is normal and what is kind of slightly increased mental wellness, and then what is mental illness. I think that what's important to remember is mental illness lies on the same spectrum as mental wellness, right? It's on the same spectrum. So on the one hand, all of us experience some kind of stress. All of us experience some kind of, let's say, sadness, to use the example of sadness, at some point in our life. But that does not make it mental illness. Because it's triggered by something that's happened in our life. It lasts for a short period of time and it goes away. And all of us experience that. That doesn't make it illness. But on the other hand, if you get stress, which might have been triggered by something that's happened in your life, or it just happened by itself, which remains, it does not go away period of time. You can't put your finger on why it's happening. It's of so much intensity that it's causing you a lot of distress. And it's lasted for a long time and it's affecting your functioning, your interpersonal functioning, your social functioning, your occupational functioning. That then we kind of start thinking, okay, maybe this is depression. So at one end is normal sadness, which is triggered off by events in our life. At the other end is depression. Both substrate emotions in both are the same, sadness. The difference being is this is time limited, intermittent, goes away by itself. At the other end of depression, the intensity is high, the duration is high, and it interferes with your functioning. Three criteria that you can apply for any other mental health problem to determine if you have a mental illness and need to seek help. Its duration, its intensity, and how it interferes with your functioning. If it ticks all of these boxes, then you have to kind of seek help. Now, Once you've decided where to seek help, I think the big problem again is where do you seek help and from whom do you seek help. There are various places from where you can seek help. There are online and offline sources. So online sources are the kind that Nishad spoke about earlier. I'm kind of plugging Covidav for you, Nishad. But there are also other platforms like Covidav. So there are things that which connect you with people digitally. So at the other end of the platform are real people who are kind of helping you. But there are also more slightly technologically advanced platforms like chatbots, which use artificial intelligence or machine learning. So there's no person at the other end, but there is the machine that's kind of communicating with you and trying to help you. And then there are the traditional offline systems of help. So there are counselors who could be or could not be psychologists but are trained in providing counseling. There are psychologists who are basically people who have done a master's level training in clinical psychology or an MPhil or a PhD in clinical psychology. But who cannot prescribe medications. And then there are psychiatrists who can do some of the things that we spoke about earlier, which is counseling and some kind of psychological therapies, and then who are also allowed to prescribe medications if needed for the mental health problems. So basically, broadly, offline and online systems. Online, again, various the ones which connect you with people, the ones which are basically a machine speaking to you. Offline is broadly three. I mean, there can be more, but broadly three: counselors, psychologists, and psychiatrists. Some who can provide only psychological treatments, and psychiatrists who can, along with some kind of psychological treatments, also provide you with medications. What is important is to be able to identify that you have got a problem and seek help at the right time. The longer you delay seeking help, the more severe things become. The longer you delay seeking help, the more difficult it becomes to come back to the other end of the spectrum, that is the wellness spectrum. So these are the things to keep in mind when you're kind of seeking help. Can't hear you, Nishad. You're muted.
Yeah. So I think that was very insightful. There were a few things which I personally was not very sure about and didn't know, and I'm sure we have the audience also who had a few doubts about what self care was, and I'm sure they were informed now. Uh, Thank you, Dr. Narkani. I think we'll move on to the audience questions. We'll only take maybe one or two that have come. Okay. Okay, there's this question. Uh, what specifically can we do with regards to taking care of relationships during COVID-19?
Okay. Okay, yeah, that's. I think it's a complex question because I don't really know what you mean by relationships. Right? So there are different kinds of relationships, and there are various things that can happen within relationships. But I will try to kind of find a common denominator between all relationships. And I think what's very important, especially in COVID times, when it comes to relationships of any kind, is communication, because that's getting hampered to a great deal. Um, Especially, I mean, when people are together and when people have to be separated because of conditions related to COVID and lockdown, etc. So when people are together, communication is getting hampered because a lot of people are working from home, working very long time, kind of ridiculous hours, and finding it difficult to spend time with their loved ones, and kind of talking with them, having regular conversations, etc. So that's not happening. And if for some reason you are at a distance, I mean, if you are in another country and your parents are in India, or you are in different parts of the country which has been kind of happening because of COVID, you are not able to meet, etc. I think again the same thing. I mean, communication. You need to be speaking to each other more often, and again with technology, that's not difficult anymore, and it's not just voice now. I mean, you can kind of do video calls, etc. So I think the key and bottom line to any strong relationship, uh, pre-COVID, COVID, post-COVID, is always going to be communication. What COVID has done is for a lot of people made it difficult to kind of have those communication. But if we are able to sort out that issue about communication, if we are in the same place, then spending time together to talk about things and have conversations, or just being together, I mean, doing things together. You don't have to be talking all the time, but just doing things together, and then communicating with other people who are away from you. But the most important thing in doing all of this is just like what I said about finding time to do things that you find pleasurable. Is again for this thing is finding time or making time to have that communication. If you don't do that, then it's not going to work. So you have to, just like how if you've got high blood pressure, doctor says take a pill. You kind of wake up in the morning, have breakfast, and take a pill. This is like a pill for your mental well-being. For anything that's you need to do to take care of your mental well-being, you have to kind of find time and do it on a regular basis.
Right. I hope that answers the question. Um, well, we have one here. So, uh, thanks for the compliment. This is from Miss Vidusha Karavadi. Very wonderful messages. How to cope with situation like when a close friend or relative tells their anxiety issues and it kind of passes on to you.
Okay. If I understood this right, what I'm understanding is that someone tells you about a stressful situation and then it causes you
Yeah, it seems.
stress.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
right.
Okay. So the how you deal with it is not going to be any different from how you deal with if you are directly experiencing the stress yourself, right? So now there are kind of it becomes slightly complicated because there are two issues, right? You have to help your friend or relative to deal with the stress, and then you have to take care of the stress that you are experiencing because of their stress. Again, I think the whole thing about locus of control that I spoke about earlier is very important. You have to be able to separate out their problems from yourself and say, okay, this is a discrete problem. This is a discrete problem that they are experiencing. Now let me stand outside and see how I can help them to deal with their problem without making it my own. So being able to separate what is you and what the other person is experiencing is extremely important. And then taking that objective view is very, very important. Once you've done that and you kind of help them sort out their problems, that helps you kind of stay a distance from that and not take up that anxiety yourself. But despite that, if that's happening to you, what you need to do is all the other things that I've spoken to you about, because now that stress is no longer that other person's stress, it's now also your stress, and you have to do all of the other things or some of the other things that I spoke about within self-care to help yourself. But the first thing to do is to be able to distance yourself objectively from that situation and say, this is not me, I'm going to help, but to help, I have to kind of stand outside of this and look at it as an objective observer and see what I can do to help.
Sure. I think we have one more, but that's more of a
Suggestion for you.
suggestion.
I think
So point
it's a
taken.
wonderful suggestion. Yeah, I think it's very
Yeah, I
good.
think point taken.
Because
Thanks.
just to kind of, if I may quickly come up here, I mean, we are doing a national level survey of how COVID is affecting people's mental well-being, and one of the things that have come out from that is almost a third of people from the survey population are having responsibilities to take care of someone else. And this could be, this is not just minor children, but also elderly parents, elderly grandparents, people experiencing chronic physical illnesses, are disabled or bedridden. And then a third is a large number. I mean, if 3 out of 10 people in India have kind of having those kind of responsibilities, especially in COVID-19, where you can't usually get external support as much as you used to get before. I think it would be very useful to kind of have a talk on how to help people do that.
Yeah, Seems great. Yeah, that was Shalaka. Shalaka, you can always, you can even follow Dr. Abhijit Nadkarni on Twitter. Any questions that you might have, you can, direct to him there as well. Uh, so I think that is about it. Thank you once again, Dr. Nadkarni, for obliging. I think it was a great session, very informative, and I'm sure every one of us has learned quite a bit today. And especially since we had Virat, and quite a few of us chose this session over Virat, that itself shows that we really were looking forward to that.
Thank you,
Uh,
Rishabh. Thank you for having me, and thank you to the wonderful audience that has joined us despite of Virat.
sure. Great. So I think we will call it a day. All of you guys have a great weekend ahead, and thank you for joining in. Yeah. All right.
Take care. Bye bye.
Sure. Cheers. Bye.